You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. Jake Burger is trying to will himself on to the White Sox roster. He's going to try to find a spot there on a roster that seems pretty set and isn't looking for another first base, third base, right-handed power hitter on it. But he seems determined early in spring with yet another home run yesterday to make it onto this roster.
I like my burgers with cheese, grilled onions, bacon, and a hell of a lot of determination.
Yeah, I do too. You root for the guy, don't you? I mean, he's been on this show before. His wife's been on this show before. I haven't had the little kid on the show yet, but we'll get to that eventually when he can, I'm sure, string some words together. We'll get all the burgers on. But like...
Wait, I just have to ask. It's a terrible joke, but is Jake Burger's kid considered a slider?
Knock it off. You root for him because he's such a nice guy, right? And you root for him because he dealt with all those injuries, and he had years taken away from him. And, he's going to have a very hard time making real money in pro baseball because of the amount of control the team's going to have over him for the amount of time that he has not even spent up in the major leagues. You root for him because you want him to succeed. I mean, he's a first-round draft pick. He's a high-end draft pick who, again, good dude, funny guy, very personable when you talk to him. I mean, on the air and then off the air when we were joking around with him. He's a guy that when I see him up there and he does good things, I smile. I legitimately want him to make the team. I can't figure out where he goes, though, because, again, unless Oscar Colas isn't the right fielder, which would mean Gavin Sheets is, along with Eloy Jimenez playing 50-some games out in right field. As long as Colas is in right field, I think they still take the left-handed power hitter, and Sheets is one of the 4 position player bench spots. And you got to have a backup catcher, and you're taking Romy. And even if they dump Larry, which is still really iffy that they're going to eat $11 million over 2 years to get rid of him, you're not going to take then a Jake Marisnick or a Billy Hamilton who gives you some more speed and more versatility in the outfield, and instead you're going to get a guy who is not very good defensively, at least from what we've seen when he's up in the major leagues. I always feel bad saying it again because I like him, and also only plays first base, third base. In fact, he just started playing first base here in spring training.
Well, and you hit it on the head. It's positional versatility that holds him back because he's not going to be the starting third baseman on this team. So you don't think they're going to eat Larry Garcia's money. They're definitely not eating Yoan Moncada's money.
Right.
And also,
Yoan Moncada's a starting third baseman on a lot of Major League Baseball teams who has underperformed at the plate, but is still a viable starting player. I wouldn't put Jake Burger in over Moncada unless I thought Moncada was dogging it out there or needed a wake-up call. Then it'd be like, we're bringing Burger up for 2 weeks to remind this kid that, it doesn't matter how much money you make, you still got to put in the effort. Although I don't think that's going to be a problem with him this year. He seems very motivated, but he's got a much better glove. He's the third baseman.
Well, yeah, and that's why it's not, as I was about to say, it's not even a position battle between Jake Burger and Yoan Moncada, so we're not even having that conversation. It's really a question of who can Burger back up. And his only spot that he can back up is Andrew Vaughn. Well, that's 2 right-handed batters. Gavin Sheets opened spring training with a home run. So did Burger, but Sheets beat him to it by a couple innings. And Sheets has the positional versatility of being able to play in the outfield somewhat.
This episode of Sox in the Basement and every episode of Sox in the Basement brought to you by the home of the podcast for fans, by fans, Cork and Carry at the Park in the shadow of the ballpark at 33rd and Princeton. An award-winning menu of burgers and ballpark favorites at a great price. You enhance your ballpark experience when you kick off the game and finish off afterwards at Cork and Carry at the Park. Extensive bar with a rotation of craft beers, familiar favorites, spirits, and wines. Get out there and see us all year long at the Cork. And do not forget about Parade Day. Southside Irish Parade is coming up on the 12th of March. Cork and Cary Beverly, 10614 Southwestern Avenue. Sox in the Basement will be out there, and I'm giving away a ton of free Sox in the Basement swag. Come out, have a pint with us, wear the green, enjoy the parade at Cork and Cary Beverly. Learn more at corkandcary.com.
And with power hitters too, it's about working them into the lineup and not just the major leagues is not built for the professional pinch hitter anymore. Okay. There's not going to be those guys that made their living in the National League where they would just be the pinch hitter. And they were going to get an at bat pretty much every day, every game, because they were going to hit for the pitcher at some point, or they were going to come up in a situation and hit for your catcher who couldn't hit, your backup catcher. When teams would have a shortstop that had no ability with the bat, which is a long, long time ago. There's no need to have Gavin Sheets there as a pinch hitter every day, but there is a potential need for Gavin Sheets to be in a rotation to give Pedro some flexibility to move guys in and out of the lineup a little bit and go heavy lefty, for example, on some days when there's a righty that really kind of demands it. Or give guys some days off to keep guys fresh so that you're not relying on Eloy Jimenez playing 80 games out in the outfield. His versatility, Sheets' versatility, keeps him, I think, there. I really honestly, and I hate to say it, I think Jake Burger's best bet is to have another great spring, show that he is a viable major league bat, and see if that's somebody that Rick Hahn can then leverage into something that they need at the end of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I don't think that he has a long-term role on the White Sox, at least the way that they're set up right now, unless, of course, somebody gets injured. And now all of a sudden he's coming up from AAA and he's filling a role, right? I mean, like, he's there in case Andrew Vaughn gets hurt so he can play first base. He's there in case Yoan Moncada gets hurt, where you're going to have some issues over at third base in the field, but he's going to hopefully make up for it with his bat. I mean, how many times did we see him last year in the short sample size that we got where he would butcher a play at third and then make up for it 2 innings later with a 2-run home run? Like, it's almost like a wash. Yeah. But the thing is that, like, that's what he's kind of there for. He's there if all of a sudden they need somebody to come off the bench and they don't have another left-handed power hitter and Sheets is hurt. Right? I mean, there's a way that he makes it up onto the roster, but he's waiting on injury most likely to get on the White Sox roster. And more than likely, if he has a big spring and then he goes down to AAA and he's performing, then a competent general manager should be able to move him to be able to get something valuable back in return that isn't roadblocked right now on this team. Here's the thing. If there's an injury and he comes up, I'm not going to be worried about very much of a drop-off at all.
I would say, could Jake Burger close?
Yeah, I know, because here's the thing. I loved what Grifol said when he was talking about whether or not he had a closer in mind. And he's like, well, first I want to see him pitch. I love that, okay? I mean, he's a new manager. He could very easily sit there and look at stats like I do, like back of the baseball card, and be like, Reynaldo Lopez. And I think that's who it should be. I still believe that. I hope he looks at that at least while he's looking at them pitch. But, I also like the idea that he's like, first, let me figure out what I think of these guys. Then let's sit down and look at them statistically and what they do and what they trend to do. And then who says I'm going to have a closer? I'm more of a leverage guy. And I love that. That was one of those things that drove people nuts with Tony La Russa, is that he didn't have the flexibility when it came to how he used Liam Hendriks. Sometimes he wasted Liam Hendriks or didn't get him in quick enough because he's playing for the 10th inning, but this is the big inning right here. And you got to have your closer in at that moment. So it may be bullpen by committee. And although the fantasy baseball nerd in me hates bullpen by committee because I can't score points off of it, the baseball fan in me says if it's used properly, I'm totally up for it. All right? Go by situation. The best pitcher against the heart of their lineup in the later innings, go that route.
And I agree with you 100%. The question is still, can Jake Burger pitch?
No, he cannot. Sox in the Basement listeners, if you have a loved one that is not getting around the house very well, switch to a new age of life with Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. It's all about keeping them in the home, making it easy to get around, reducing the risk of a fall. They have everything you need to do that. Nobody wants to go into assisted living. This is a viable alternative. And anybody with sleep apnea, they have the latest in CPAP technology. If you need an extra oxygen tank, they got them. Diabetes control, they got it covered. So much available. Check it out on their website at hhme.com. Mention Sox in the Basement. You get additional money off. Plus, they're going to work with your insurance. They always do a great job with that. Stop in and see them and speak to them in person. See what I'm talking about right there, not online, not in a catalog. Get into their Evergreen Park showroom at 3518 West 95th Street. On the line with me right now from Camelback Ranch, checking in, soaking in the sun, although it doesn't sound like it's as warm out there as I imagine it to be. Scott Merkin joins us on Sox in the Basement. How are you, Merk?
Good, and we have to be honest and no mistakes here. I'm at a hotel near Camelback Ranch, not at Camelback Ranch right now.
Okay, fine.
Close though. Let's paint the actual picture. I know you. I know to make it seem like I'm calling from the dugout just to get it live in action, but I was at Camelback Ranch earlier today. How about that?
Well, give me an inside look on this spring training. You've seen so many of them. Do you have a feeling about this one? Because I'm sure there's times you show up to a spring training and you go, this is a mess. Or you show up to a spring training and you go, wow, there's a different vibe here than the year before. Like, what's your impression early on watching this spring training?
I'm trying to think. I don't think I've ever been to a spring training where I thought this is a mess unless I was driving back from Tempe or Mesa in rush hour. Then I was probably swearing this is a mess as I was driving back to Glendale. But I don't think I've ever really, known like in spring training where like, oh my God, this team's in trouble. But I will go to the second one and say there's a different vibe this year, 100%. I mean, these guys are playing with something to prove. The guys who were with the team last year, which is a good part of the group coming back, that was, a big plan from the front office and, Rick and Kenny and Chris Getz and everyone else is that, as bad as last season was, and it was as bad a year as I can remember for the White Sox. I've covered this my 21st season covering them. There were worse records, but in terms of the expectations coming off a pretty solid year in 2021 with a lot of injuries on that team, still winning 93 games and getting to the playoffs, to have what happened last year was just, an unforeseen debacle. So there's a lot of guys who really have, feel like they have something to prove as a team more so than individually this year, and that's a good thing. And on the flip side, you have Pedro Grifol and his staff who have come in, and aside from guys like Kurt Hassler and Ethan Katz and Darryl Boston, is a new staff, and I don't think they're as worried about the vibe. They love the vibe that's in camp. They love the desire to get better, the desire to work hard, but they just have a good system in place. Pedro's talked a lot about culture. I wrote about it, after talking to him on the phone before spring training about, I think they want to develop kind of like a winning way. They really want to develop, they want to win, but they want to do it in a style that can be repeated. It's almost kind of like mechanics, the mechanics of winning, I guess. They have a process and they take care of things right when they happen. If there's a drop pop up on the infield, as there was the first two games, they go after, they talk about it after the game, and the next day they implement something to try and correct that issue. And I'm just using that as an example. That's going to happen, obviously, especially with Jake learning another new position at first base, Jake Burger, that is.
All right, so 26-man roster. We're all over here trying to figure out what's going to happen with it. 13 pitchers, 13 players. Take the 9 starters and assume that Colas is going to be the right fielder. A lot of people seem to feel that that's a given, even though he's not officially on the 40-man roster yet. You got to bring a backup catcher. They keep talking about Romy Gonzalez. Gavin Sheets is the left-handed power hitter likely to come off the bench. And Larry Garcia still got 2 years and $11 million left on his contract. And you get a guy like Jake Burger who comes out guns a-blazing, but you're not really sure if there's room for him to get in there. What are the actual battles in camp? Would the White Sox move on from a Garcia if somebody said, I'm better than him and proved it out there, and they would eat that money? I mean, does a guy like Jake Burger or one of these non-roster invites that are in the outfield like Marisnik or Reyes or any of these other guys, Billy Hamilton, do they have a shot to make this team?
Yeah, I think yes to all that. I think, remember, when you're talking about, well, the Heels that, and they're not going to eat that kind of money. That's not the White Sox way. Remember, they cut ties with Dallas Keuchel last year. They did the same with John Danks. Great guy, but I mean, after his surgery just wasn't the same. They did the same at the end of his contract. They did the same in the second year of Jeff Kepinger's contract. So they will do it. There's no question about it. I don't know if it'll happen out of camp. I would not be surprised if he breaks camp with the team. And I think one of the things they can couch this as, even though they really like Romy, and I think Romy, until they added Elvis Andrus, is probably the clubhouse leader at second base. They can say that, they're going to send him to Charlotte and let him get a little more time at all the positions, because Rick has talked about that, they envision him in a Ben Zobrist type of role. So I could see where they will send him to Charlotte and let him play the outfield, let him play right, let him play left, get him a little work at third and a shortstop, and then, maybe a month or two in, or maybe not even that long, you can see what happens. So I could see him making the team, but I could also see them talking about that may be best served for his development. And Jake's an interesting case, same with Gavin. I think they both clearly have bats that play at the major league. I mean, they both have power to burn, and that's a big intrinsic value in this day and age of this game. The Sox did not hit home runs last year. We know that. Gavin was one of the team leaders in home runs. And I do think that all those veteran outfielders have a shot. They're not all going to make it, but one of them from that group, Victor Reyes, Jake Versnick, Billy Hamilton, who is very well known to the White Sox. I really had a chance to talk to Billy yet, but it's amazing that he played a nice role in that 2021 team, but he wasn't like an everyday starter for the whole season. And yet I remember when I don't pay a ton of attention to this stuff, I remember when I tweeted out the story about where I found out that he was coming back, and my goodness, there were like 3,000 likes on that tweet.
Yeah, people liked Billy.
Just a great presence, he's so good for the clubhouse. He's such an upbeat dude. He's a very good defensive player still. He can run, obviously, and I think this team is going to run this year. I think a lot of teams are going to run more this year, but I think you're right. I think you're right in, the sense of backup catcher, most likely Gavin Sheets, and then either Leori or Romy would be one of the three of the four spots there.
Scott Merkin joining us here on Sox in the Basement from Camelback Ranch. He and every guest on Sox in the Basement brought to you proudly by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore, and see everything they have going on this weekend and beyond at lamontdowntown.com. You're talking about guys that have great character that the White Sox have in camp right now. If you looked at the back of the baseball card, for a lot of guys that could have been brought in to play second base, several of those baseball cards would have looked better than Elvis Andrus if you just take out that 2-month stretch when he got to the White Sox and was red hot. Yeah. Over the last couple of years, he's not been like, a superstar at the plate. But when the White Sox bring him in, one of the things they point out right away is leadership and the veteran presence and the fact that he was vocal in the short time that he was with that team in the back end when things started to turn around. Is that why he's there? They just needed more guys that would step up and tell guys, let's go, wake up, let's play. Do they need more of that in the clubhouse?
Well, I think they like what they saw from him in the field too. He not only played a good shortstop, and they thought that he'd move over naturally or move over without an issue to second, but he also gives you insulation in short in case Tim needs a day off or Tim has some sort of break in the action there, where you can move him over and have a guy who played shortstop at a high level for 14 years take over there. And he hit the ball great with the White Sox. He was one of their, I think, top. He was the main reason why they made their little run to kind of get back into it, before the Cleveland sweep at home led to an 8-game losing streak, which pretty much ended a rough, miserable season. But, if you go by what Rick said, that, they wanted him back shortly after he started playing for them last year. They liked him so much. And, in fairness to Elvis, it was his first move into free agency. And really, it was just kind of amazing. At 14 years, it was his first move into free agency. He wanted to play shortstop. We talked to him today after the game, after he played second for the first time today. He was very funny and very honest today that, it did feel weird. He said it was one of the weirdest games he's had, but he's working a lot with third base coach and infield instructor Eddie Rodriguez to get, more comfortable at second base. And I think he'll be fine. He talked about this when he first came back about, with all the shifting that had been done the last few years, he felt like he's played second a number of times already. So I don't think it's going to be that big an adjustment for him. But again, he's a good player. And if the other guys, who were hurt or underperformed last year or both back this year, then you don't need him to be, the number 1 or number 3 or number 4 guy on that team. He could be a very good contributor, from the bottom of the order. And, Rick maybe had a good line, kind of a funny joke about when they saw him play for a quarter of a year last year, they didn't extrapolate out his numbers and say, well, we'll multiply this by 4, and this will he'll have. He said, if they do have that, they're going to have the MVP on the team, probably, maybe of the AL this year. But they just, knew that he'd provide them good, steady play and be a major clubhouse force in there. So, I think they're building a good clubhouse, a good atmosphere overall for this team. And again, you got to win on the field. You could have the best guys in the world, but you got to get it done once you get, out on the field.
All right, before I let you go, let's talk bullpen. I have seen so many articles with people trying to predict what the White Sox are going to do. I have also noticed that their new manager is saying I'm more of a leverage guy, so who knows if I'm going to have a specific closer while Liam Hendriks is out. I'm leaning towards Reynaldo Lopez because of what he did last year. I know Kendall Graveman has experience. If you had to put money down on it, who do you think is going to be closing games the most for the White Sox?
Well, first of all, the closer of the White Sox is Liam Hendriks. Unless, it's been great to see him a few times. He really hasn't. He said hi when he's walked by a few times. He usually comes in and does his workout when kind of the players are out on the field. And it's amazing to see him. Our workroom is out of the press box, so we see him playing long toss out there. And it's just such a great sight to know what he's going through and still able to do that. I mean, they're an amazing couple, him and his wife, Christy, and he's an amazing dude overall. So hopefully he's healthy. That's the biggest thing. In the interim, I think Pedro really is going to go by leverage. And I think, there may be situations where, maybe Graveman is thought of as a closer, but they need him in the seventh. That's the time where they need him. So I think I would think Lopez would be the guy. I would agree with you. And, Graveman, when we first talked to him, I think it was like the maybe second day of camp, and he basically said he told Pedro, I'll do whatever you want me to do. He said, I don't care about holds. I don't care about saves. He goes, I'm too old and been in this game too long to worry about that stuff. He goes, so just put me in where we can win. That's what I want. That's all I want out of this. And I think that's the same attitude for Joe Kelly. I know it's the same attitude for Aaron Bummer, the same attitude for all those guys out there. So they really have, just off the top of my head, there's 4 guys right there without Liam who can pitch in high leverage situations. Kelly, a healthy Kelly, Bummer, Lopez, and now I forgot someone and Graveman. I just talked about Graveman.
Scott Merkin writes for MLB.com. He's always nice enough to jump on the line with us. I know that we had to wait a few extra minutes because you were around with Hawk, which I thought was hysterical.
I was talking to my old friend Hawk. Oh, he's great to catch up with Hawk. What a legend and a Hall of Famer. One of the best. Just a joy to know him over the years. And it's great to sit down and talk with guys like Hawk or Bob Uecker. I mean, they just have so much baseball history and baseball knowledge. I mean, it's just. I'll share a really quick story before we go on Bob Uecker. When Hawk, the year he retired, the Sox were playing the Brewers. So I went over and kind of waited in the Milwaukee dugout before the game. This is pre-COVID and everything. And he walks out, and I asked the media relations guy just to make sure there was no protocol. The guy is a Hall of Famer himself and a legend. I said, I can go up. He's like, yeah, he doesn't care. So I went up and I introduced myself, and I said, Mr. Uecker, I'm doing a story on Hawk Harrelson. And I would like to get you, and they're very good friends. Very, very. Uecker was on that weekend with Hawk for like 2 innings, I want to say, in one of the broadcasts. And I said, I'd like to talk about Hawk. And he goes, Hawk? Huh? He goes, I don't really know Hawk. And I kind of laughed. And he goes, no, I don't really know Hawk. He goes, I know Andre Dawson. He's the Hawk. I can tell you all about Andre Dawson. So now I'm like, okay, is this a bit or is this, is he really? I said, I know he knows him. I know they're friends. Hawk just told me this like an hour ago. And I said, no, I really enjoyed watching Andre Dawson play, but I'm not doing a story on him. And he goes, well, I don't know Hawk Harrelson, but I can tell you a lot of stories about Andre Dawson, the Hawk. He's a great player. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't really need that, but thank you. And he kind of grabbed my arm and he goes, I know Hawk. What do you need? And he sat down and talked to me for like 30 minutes after that. So,
I love how he got you too. That's the best part.
Like at the beginning, I was like, okay, I get it. It's a bit because no one does more shtick than I do. Trust me. I'm like the Borscht Belt comedian of the baseball beat, so I get that. But then the fact that he was committed to it really made me believe, like, I know he knows him, but maybe he just doesn't feel comfortable talking about him, or something like that. But and then he let me off the hook, and he's like, "What do you need? Whatever you need, we got it." And he gave me great stories about Hawks.
Awesome, Scott Merkin over nearby Camelback Ranch, not actually there right now while we're talking to him. Thanks so much for jumping on.
Okay, Chris, take care.
Ed, it is a busy weekend at Hailstorm Brewing Company. Mark Taylor is going to be playing at 6 p.m. on Friday night. Joe Orozco playing a set at 6 p.m. on Saturday. They're also doing their yoga event that they have every first Saturday of every month, 10 a.m. until 11 a.m., $15. You get an hour of a yoga class and a draft pour. Get more details and tickets at hailstormbrewing.com and stop in there and check out that big, beautiful beer hall, a working brewery with an amazing tap room. And like I said, the big tables there, it becomes a party. You meet people, you make new friends, you get old friends together. The kitchen has also become a reason to get out there. The chicken and sausage gumbo. Wow. And you throw a little bit of bacon and pulled pork on that grilled cheese and you're pretty much set for the day. They're open at 11 a.m. now because they're serving the lunch crowd. Visit the official brewery of Sox in the Basement in Tinley Park at 8060 186th Street, right off of 80th Avenue, Hailstorm Brewing Company. Scott Merkin writes articles on MLB.com. Ed here writes articles on Sox in the Basement. And
those two things are not equivalent to each other in any way, shape, or form.
No, they're not. But Mismatched Sox is found at soxinthebasement.com, and I try to get it out on the social medias. And you are going after PECOTA. This is the time of year when you do comparisons, the White Sox versus teams or divisions, and you blow up the PECOTA projections and make them look silly. And you took a head-to-head look with the Twins with an amazing photo as the cover photo. I don't want to give it away. Go to soxinthebasement.com and check it out. But the fact that you were able to incorporate Patrick Swayze and this evaluation of the Sox versus the Twins and whether or not PECOTA's wrong because it has the Twins finishing better than the White Sox, it's worth the click.
Here's what I do, okay? Forget your advanced metrics and stats and all that stuff. Just looking position by position, who's manning it for the Twins, who's manning it for the White Sox, which player is better. The more better for the White Sox, they win, right? And that's what I'm looking at is how many of these position players projected to play for the Twins are better than what the White Sox run out there. And I did it for the Guardians already, and I'm going to do it for the AL East contenders, and I'll do it for the AL West contenders. And, you know, it's one of those things where I think sometimes we get lost in statistics and we get lost in what an AI or a mathematical model could do. And we kind of forget just to look and see, is it possible that they just suck in terms of who's playing, for example, left field for the Twins or their lack of DH in this case?
So here's the thing. I like all these back and forths. I disagree with you on one of them. I do.
Which one?
I mean, I defended the man on the last episode, and I still love him as a shortstop, but you're going to try to tell me that Carlos Correa isn't as good as Tim Anderson?
And I think one of the problems is that you had two teams pass on Carlos Correa, which means that he may be damaged goods. Okay?
Yeah, but I don't think he's damaged this year. It's just he's damaged for where you don't want to give him 10 years.
Well, I understand that. But I also do think that that's going to be something that factors into, one, how he's used, and two, how he plays. Also, he is a guy that is built around power versus what Anderson does in terms of trying to get on base and trying to just move the ball around. And power, I don't think, lasts as long as it is. And I think you're already seeing Carlos Correa get over his prime in terms of that. And as the majors kind of moves back away from some of those metrics, I think a guy like Anderson can be more valuable. Plus, how many times has Tim Anderson just carried the White Sox all the way through? Versus, you know, Carlos Correa not even being the best player on the Astros when he was there by a long shot. He was like the third or fourth, fifth best hitter on the team. So I think you can make the case for Carlos Correa. I really do. And I went back and forth, but I'm going to give it to TA for right now.
Well, here's the thing. If you get a focused, healthy Tim Anderson without distractions in season, able to play the majority of games and locked in, all right, fine. Because you're right. He can put a team on his back. He can be the emotional leader of the team. He can be the engine that makes the car go.
And that's what I'm looking for.
On the phone line with me once again, another week to nerd out with the Sox Nerd, Dave Marran. How are you, Sox Nerd?
Great, sir. How are you?
Good, Dave. Look, we're gonna go around during spring training to all the different positions, and so we've done pitchers, we've done catchers. Now we're gonna go around the horn a little bit and hit first base and try to do a deep dive into stats when it comes to White Sox first baseman. You ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
Let's do it. What do you got?
You know, Chris, one of my favorite scenes from one of my favorite movies, The Hangover, is when the boys are pushing the car with the tiger back to Tyson's house, and Stu says to Alan, "We need you, buddy. This is your time to shine, okay?" That's what I want to say to Andrew Vaughn when it comes to first base. Andrew, we need you, buddy. This is your time to shine. First base certainly has been a heritage position for the Chicago White Sox, that's for sure. Since 1983, that's 31 seasons, only 7 players have started at the position on opening day for the Sox. And since 1991, that number is 4. So we've got a lot of pressure on him. He's certainly stepping into a big role.
So I did a look at how he did playing first base last year. 286 on-base percentage. He hit 250, slugging percentage of 391 in 22 games. But I don't think that really tells the full story with him, because I really want to see what he can do when he's settled into one position in one spot in the batting order. After all, this is a guy who made at least one start at every spot in the batting order last season. I found that to be incredible. He started the most at DH 66. Vaughn's played every position but shortstop, center, catcher, and pitcher in his big league career. When you think about it, prior to his big league debut and dating to his days at Cal, he played all but 10 of his games in the field at first base. Something interesting I found out about Jake Burger was, he homered on Saturday while playing first base, but best I can tell, that was the first time he ever played the position in the minors or going back to college.
The Sox Nerd brought to you by the law offices of Parente and Norum. If you've been injured, you need a team that will do what it takes to fight for your rights. Insurance companies only care about one thing, the bottom line, but they got the experience, dedication, and proven results to get you the care and compensation you deserve. Get a free case evaluation, 312-641-5926. Call or text that or visit pninjurylaw.com. Let me ask you this question. From the moment you said it, I've been sitting here trying to figure it out. You said 4 players have started at first base, I want to say since 1991 is what you just said. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. Does that include Vaughn? Because all I came up with was Thomas and Canerco and Abreu.
Yep. Well, there's an outlier in there.
Who is it?
It's one of the all-time great trivia questions. 1998, March 31st at Texas. Your first baseman for the Chicago White Sox on opening day was good old number 31. I'm trying to get you to say it.
I know, and I'm not going to get it.
Good old number 31, Greg Norton.
Greg Norton. Oh, man.
He started at first.
What, was Thomas injured? What the heck was going on there?
No. Frank played DH, so he must have been.
Goodness. That was a terrible decision.
Last week I gave you the Grandal in Kansas City stat. Well, Vaughn, last year, Vaughn hit 500 against Toronto, and that was the highest ever by a Sox player against Toronto, and it was tied for 7th all time, and that's for players with at least 26 at-bats against Toronto. If you don't not mind, maybe every week I'll just throw in a little zinger like that that's just way off the wall, because if I don't give them to you and they don't make the scoreboard, they just end up floating out into space somewhere.
That's what I want. I want the hidden Sox Nerd stuff that doesn't make the scoreboard on Sox in the Basement.
I will happily do that.
All right. Dave Marran, the Sox Nerd, joining us once again. We'll see you next week as we dive into second base, which should be very interesting with all the different people that you may see there this year. Yeah, Elvis is probably starting, but you're going to see a lot of people rotate in and out, and that has been a position of concern for Sox fans now for a while. Thanks so much, Dave.
Thank you, Chris.
Greg Norton, for crying out loud, Ed.
Greg Norton.
Greg Norton. That's
Norton, you're the greatest.
You know what? And that's the guy. Andrew Vaughn has to be better than Greg Norton. Like, that's
right.
It's a failure
there's
otherwise.
There's your bar right there.
It's a failure otherwise if he's not as good as Greg Norton.
He's already had a better season than Greg Norton's best season. So if he just continues to expand on this.
I'm joking about he has to be better than Greg Norton. He's got to be a lot better.
Yes, but Greg Norton's best season as a White Sox, 255, 16 home runs. Andrew Vaughn's already passed that man.
But Greg Norton's so forgettable that Sox Nerd's trying to lead me into the answer. And I'm like, 31? What, was Scott Merkin? Nope, he wasn't a first baseman.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.